Hello, I'm Julie, and this is Stamp with Julie Baum. I am an independent demonstrator with Stampin Up, and I'm here today to show you card number 1 out of 3 that we made at Stamp Club in November of 2022. As I mentioned, there will be 3 projects shown, one in each of 3 separate videos. So this is project 1. We're starting with a card base. This is mint macaron, and it is 8.5 by 5.5. Score it and fold it at 4 1/4 inches to create your card base. Then I have another piece of mint macaron. This piece of cardstock measures 3 5/8 by 4 7/8. Then I've got DSP number 1 and number 2. I'm considering this smaller one the number 1 because this is going to be your primary focal piece. So this is the part that you really are trying to capture in the idea of your card. This piece measures 3.5 by 4 3/4 inches. And then your DSP number 2 should coordinate with that first piece, but be more of a background print. This piece measures 4 inches by 5 1/4. I do have a little scrap here of real red cardstock. It is 3/4 inch by 4 inches. You'll see how we incorporate that. And then I have a small scrap of white. It doesn't really matter what size you start with. Mine happens to be a 1/2 inch by about 4 inches, but it depends on the greeting that you decide to stamp on it. All right, now this card goes together very, very quickly. And I do want to mention that there's a Simply Saturday episode. It's episode 42, and I'm going to put a link right up here in the corner of this video if you'd like to see the same card design but done with different designer series paper. So be sure and check that out as well. All right, the first thing we're going to do is some gluing. So I'm going to attach my DSP number 1 to this piece of cardstock. This DSP is from the Santa Express 12 by 12 pack of papers. So I'm using my liquid glue on the back of the paper. And attaching it to this piece of cardstock. Now it has a very, very narrow border. So those dimensions that I gave you allow for such a tiny border of color showing around the edges, as opposed to a typical one. Usually I have a little bit larger border, but this is really all about the designer series paper. All right, then I'm going to attach my coordinating DSP piece number 2. This flip side is beautiful too, but for the purpose of this card, it's a little bit too busy. I really like the design of this card because it's a good way to use up some of your designer series paper. And what I had mentioned in Simply Saturday's episode is it's a good way to use up some of the challenging papers that you have. You know how you always have your favorites, and well, either you're a hoarder and you don't use your favorites or you use those favorites immediately because you love them so much. And then you might be left over with some of the prints that just aren't your favorite, or maybe they're kind of large. Like I feel like this print was large and difficult to use in smaller pieces. You really needed a large piece of this in order to see Santa driving the Santa Express. So again, I like it because it's a good way to use up some of those pieces that might be more challenging. All right, I'm going to grab some dimensionals, and I'll use 5 on this one. I am going to use 1 on each of the 4 corners, and then I've got that extra one in the middle, mostly just because this is such a large piece that I'm attaching. Okay, so this is going to go to the front of the card. And we're nearly done already. This is such a fast design. This would make a great set of Christmas cards if you are getting ready to make your cards and send them out to a lot of people. Because it goes together so fast, you could certainly do a lot of these in a short amount of time. or without thinking about Christmas, just using up some of your other designer series paper to create lots of cards in a flash. All right, so there is our basic card. I'm going to go ahead and put our attached strips on it with our stamping. I did choose a lighter card base for this particular card so that a white piece is not really necessary on the inside. This is plenty light enough that you could write your message. And again, we're saving time on this particular design. All right, so on the white piece, I'm going to stamp this stamp that says "You Light Up the Season." It does come from the Trees for Sale stamp set. This is available in the current July to December mini catalog 2022. And I'm going to use black ink. My strip is a teeny bit longer than I will ultimately need it, but I like to give myself a little bit of space, and I can always trim it down once it's been stamped, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. All right, so I'm going to add a little more ink. All right, I'm going to line this up. Size-wise, it's just barely going to fit on this strip. Let that ink soak in for a moment. All right, there are the words, and I'll just use my paper snips to trim. I kind of like a little bit on this side, and so I'm just going to trim the right side to match it, about like so. All right, before I attach that, I want to go ahead and prepare that red strip. This is a piece of real red cardstock. If you have a number of different punches in which to make the banner end, you could certainly do that. When I am teaching a class of new crafters and they don't have a lot of materials and products to choose from in their stash, then I like to teach them this simple way to do a banner end. So take your snips and make a little snip into the center of your strip, then go from corner to that same spot that you began with. And that gives you a nice even banner end. All right, so I'm going to attach the red one first. Now, because I have set this piece on here slightly askew, I'm going to go ahead and line this up nice and straight, and I'm using the folded edge of my card here as my eyeballing to get this piece straight, because it can be a little tricky. Your eye wants to go this way because of this paper. All right, so that's in place, and the words, these could certainly go right on the red strip if that's what you prefer. I think it could go angled down or up. So on this particular one, I'm going to choose up. And that is in place. As I mentioned in Simply Saturday, episode 42, this could certainly benefit from some other embellishments if you wish. You could add a ribbon or any kind of rhinestone or shiny embellishment, but for the sake of keeping it easy, I chose not to and am just letting the paper speak for itself. All right, so that is project 1 from Stamp Club that we made. Here are a couple of other looks. All right, this is just a different cut of the same paper. Here is a different background paper. That one's cute too. And then if you do go back and watch that Simply Saturday, episode 42, you will also see the same design done in different holiday papers. So thank you so much for watching. Do tune in to project number 2 and project number 3 from Stamp Club of November 2022. In the description below this video, I will put lots of helpful information for you, especially dimensions and the products that were used today. I'll also provide a host code. I would certainly love to be your demonstrator, and if there are Stampin' Up! Products that you would like to order, I would love for you to visit my online store, and at checkout you can insert that host code That would be very much appreciated. I thank you so much. And until next time, happy stamping.